welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this new episode of Africa Today, where we get you the latest news and events taking place on the African scene. And we will start off with our major top stories and reports. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli said the Egyptian government attaches top priority to promoting economic cooperation with Arab and African countries. More details.
Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli affirmed the Egyptian government attaches top priority to promoting economic cooperation with the Arab and African partners, especially in light of the economic and social challenges caused by COVID-19. This came during Madbouli's meeting with a delegation from members of the Governors' Council of the Arab-Africa Trade Bridges Program. At the beginning of the meeting, Madbouli voiced happiness over the meeting of the Arab and African ministers, who are executive members of the Islamic Development Bank and heads of financial institutions, who paid a visit to Egypt to attend the third meeting of the AATB program. The program is considered a platform for consultations, exchanging viewpoints, successful experiments, and promoting the government's efforts to enhance trade between the Arab and African countries. Meanwhile, he voiced appreciation of the fruitful and constant cooperation with the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, which is considered one of the most active member countries in the ISDB group. Egypt plans to enhance its cooperation with the ITFC in the future in light of its pioneering programs, especially the AATB program, which aims to stimulate and boost trade and investment flows between Arab and African countries. For her part, Planning and Economic Development Minister Hala Saeed, who attended the meeting, said that Egypt is exerting tireless efforts to boost cooperation with the ISDB group as part of plans to enhance investment ties with the Arab and African countries. The upcoming period would witness more fruitful cooperation in this respect, pointing out to several initiatives to enhance cooperation, including the initiative which aims to enhance Egyptian experts to the African market and establish the first academy for experts in Egypt in cooperation with the private sector.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and to shed more light on this topic, we're glad to be joined over the phone by Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former assistant to the Foreign Minister. Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Good afternoon, Ambassador Bayoumi. How are you, sir? Ambassador Bayoumi, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli confirmed that the Egyptian government attaches top priority to...
I cannot hear you well.
I will raise my voice. Sir, if you can just try to listen over the phone, not over the TV. If you can just lower the voice of the TV.
Now I can hear you barely.
Great. Ambassador Bayoumi, Prime Minister Madbouli confirmed that the Egyptian government attaches a top priority to promoting economic cooperation with Arab and African partners, especially in light of the current economic repercussions and challenges facing the world, the Russian-Ukrainian war, and previously the COVID-19. How do you assess this, sir?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we gave a strong hand lately to our African and Arab relations. And both cases are similar, bearing in mind that half of the Arab world are Africans from Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania, Sudan, Somalia. All of these Arab countries are African after all. Mm-hmm. So there is a sort of similarity between the case of the Arab world and the African. Namely that I think we already exhausted all the efforts to make the trade even better. And since Egypt joined the COMESA group, which is a free trade area of 21 African countries, our exports to Africa increased by 3 times, which is a very good start. Same thing with the Arab dimension, where the Arab market is almost 20% of the Egyptian foreign trade.
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is almost the ceiling of what we can do in trade, because 70% of what Africa is importing from foreign world, we do not produce. So the answer here to this question is investment, investment, and more investment to produce things we are still importing from foreign partners. And this is the initiative of Egypt since the chairmanship of Egypt to the African Union in order to attract developed countries to come and invest in Africa with the Egyptian experience, where we have really a good experience and we are a very accepted face in Africa, because after all we are Africans, we are Muslims, we are Coptic, and all these dimensions are welcomed in Africa.
Yes.
So China answered this initiative positively. European Union also. Japan accepted this. So it's not an easy task. We have to start a huge efforts in order to make investments in Africa much more attractive. And this also put burdens on our side, that we want to make the investors, the foreign investors coming to our countries, to feel that he is appreciated, that he can finish his work as quick as possible.
Yes.
We shouldn't make his money wait at the bank until we give him the approval for his investment. Our banking system needs to improve. The transport, whether maritime or land transport or airway traffic, should be ameliorated.
Yes.
So a lot of efforts must be done there. But I think the good thing that we started since some time, and we know all these problems which I'm talking about, and we are on the right track, inshallah.
Yes. Sir, there's also an initiative to establish the first Academy of Export in Egypt in cooperation with the private sector. Would you tell us more about this initiative?
This is the matter of making good capacity of our human resources also. We are training our people, especially the young generation, in order to deal with the matters I'm talking about. Education is very important, and much more important than education is training. We need to train our workers in order to know how to produce according to the latest ways of production.
Yes.
Because we are in the whole world in a sort of big competition, and we want to be able to compete on the right track. And I think we are in good position here also, because we started early enough in order to put education with training, with invading those markets to understand much more practical dimensions of the trade and investment in Africa.
Right. Well, Ambassador Bayoumi, Egypt also aims to develop rapid plans to increase intra-regional trade and benefit from Africa's resources to reach sustainable development for all countries in the continent. How would you assess this?
This is very good part of the efforts we are doing. I remember when I was ambassador in Africa, I imported some products from Egypt, especially the canned food.
Yes.
And I gave some samples to high officials there. The Prime Minister himself talked to me saying, I am not talking to you because I want to thank you. I want to congratulate you that we didn't know that Egypt has this sort of food industry. While we cannot save our food, we throw it away if we cannot sell it in the same day.
Yes.
Same thing with fruits. So the investment we are needing is not huge investment. To establish a canned food industry, or to establish a sort of meat products and so on, it takes a very relatively small investment. And I can tell you, tens of examples how we can make a small investment and we gain a lot of results.
Yes. How can the opening of more Egyptian banks in African countries contribute to increasing trade between Egypt and the African countries?
Very important, and I hope you remember that in the last meeting between our president and some presidents of Africa, we decided to open branches of the Egyptian Misr Bank in some African countries, because this is one side of the problem, that up till now we do not have many first-class banks who can issue the document needed for exports or imports to guarantee and to support the exporters and the importers. This is very good way to see this problem, and we need much more banks in Africa, Egyptian banks in Africa. Airway traffic is not satisfactory to us. We must go to every capital in Africa. I remember I was ambassador in a country where the distance between Egypt and this country is 1 hour flight. I used to come to Egypt in 3 days because I had to change my plane in some other country and spend a couple of days in order to meet the next flight.
Yes.
We need to cover all the African capitals with our Egypt Air. This will make the whole life different.
Well, Egypt also has a number of trade agreements that link it with 55 African states. Among the most important of those agreements is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. How do you view the significance of this agreement in facilitating trade among different African states?
This was a huge step and a big leap to make our trade in Africa, the intra-trade, in a much better situation. We used to have 3 smaller groups. One of them was the COMESA, 21 countries. Egypt was a member there. According to the Egyptian initiative in 2019, we decided to combine all the 3 intra-African groups. So now we have, as you rightly said, one free trade area, which will have 51 countries with 1,200 million inhabitants. This is the largest free trade area in the world concerning the number of the inhabitants. I hope that this, of course, will lead our trade to much, much better situation.
Sir, when would the African countries be able to lower their imports from Europe and Asia and start to improving the made in Africa products?
This comes by more investment because, of course, I am not against importing because we need to import. Mind you that the biggest exporter of the world, China, is the second importer of the world. Yes. Because at least you need raw material, you need machines, and so on. But we should start with the very simple industries which we can establish, and we start by this. And we shall still in need of the European or the American or the Japanese or the Chinese experience for much more complicated industries. So it means that we are going to cooperate with every side, whether our people in Africa or our partners in the developed world.
Ambassador Bayoumi, do you agree that Africa is a promising market for Egypt in the current period?
It is very promising, but we need all what we have said. We need to make our exporters be aware that they can penetrate the African market. It's not well known that we have a free trade area with Africa, that we are exempted from any custom duties. So it needs knowledge. It needs to establish a businessman association with every single country in Europe in order to make the businessmen on both sides, Egypt and the African countries, know what is going on in the continent, and this will lead us, of course, to much better situation for trade and investment.
Right. Well, I would like to thank you very much, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former
Thank you.
assistant. Thank you, former assistant to the foreign minister. Many thanks. And dear viewers, now we move back to our special reports. A senior UN official warned Wednesday that the current political standoff in Libya could lead to instability and to parallel governments in the country. More details.
The United States is proposing ways for Libya to manage the flow of oil revenue to help it through a political crisis, as two rival prime ministers that vie for power. Rival factions have argued over who gets to control oil production, sales and revenues for years, fueling the political chaos and violence that has ravaged Libya since a 2011 NATO-backed uprising. The U.S. proposals aim to stop the crisis spilling over into economic warfare that would deprive Libyans of salaries. Any threat to Libya's output, which has topped 1.3 million barrels per day in recent months, would hit markets already reeling from the Ukraine crisis. Libya's latest crisis comes after a scheduled election. A key element of the United Nations-backed peace plan was cancelled in December as major leaders and factions squabbled over the rules. The peace plan, which also involved installing an interim unity government last year, was aimed to resolve the conflict between the country's main factions that split Libya in 2014 between rival governments in East and West.
Welcome back. Africa is facing possible shortages of grain and a sharp rise in food prices if exports from Ukraine to the continent cease amid Russia's invasion of the country. More details.
Africa is facing possible shortage of grain and sharp rise in food prices if exports from Ukraine to the continent ceased amid Russia's invasion of the country. Germany's Kiel Institute for the World Economy Research Institute said in a report that if cereal exports from Ukraine stop, that would also be felt in European markets, such as Germany. Ukraine is one of the most important grain exporters in the world and especially relevant for Africa. Losing Ukraine as supplier will noticeably worsen the supply situation across the continent. Ukraine and Russia together account for about 29% of the world's wheat and nearly a fifth of the corn trade, in addition to also being important sources of other commodities and metals. The conflict has led to a surge in commodity and metal prices, adding to inflationary pressures on the global economy. The International Monetary Fund has warned that conflict and subsequent sanctions imposed on Moscow will have a severe impact on the global economy. The Black Sea plays a major role in global food trade, exporting at least 12% of the food calories traded in the world, according to the United Nations Agency International Fund for Agriculture Development. Tunisia's imports of wheat and other cereals would permanently decrease by more than 15% and 25% respectively if Ukraine stops its exports due to the current conflict. Egypt, the Arab world's most populous country, would also be affected. Its wheat imports are expected to slump 17% and other cereals fall 19%.
Dear viewers, that's all for our episode for now. Many thanks for watching, and don't forget to join us tomorrow, same time. Till then, it's goodbye.